Well, welcome back for another session of Fast Track Promises. I don't know about you, but it has been quite the journey walking through Jesus' Bible. I mean, the ups and downs of the characters that we're seeing, it's literally like watching a reality TV show. And there's lying, cheating, stealing. And in the midst of that, over and over again, we're seeing these choices that they're making, these secrets that they're hiding, just explode in their lives in painful ways. Well, hopefully what's becoming clear is the fact that the Bible isn't a book about heroes to follow or try to become. It's really a book about a good and loving Father who walks with his children through their good choices and their bad choices. And we've shared this phrase a few times during this series. It's God gives us promises to keep us on track, but the greatest promise is that he works with people who are off track. So we're going to throw it to young Chad, and he's going to set up the rest of our series together.
So many people get hurt because of some secret we have in our heart. Now, that secret might be worry, it might be a habit, it might be lust. There's all kinds of ways in which sometimes it's bitterness. The bitterness is we say, I'm holding on to a grudge and it's not going to hurt anybody, it's just my own little thing. It's a secret bank account. It's ego, it's greed. There's something in our life that we can manage right now. It's small enough that we can manage it. And we say, I'm not hurting anybody. It's not going to hurt anybody else. It's just me. It's not a big deal. Then what happens? Life gets complicated. And all of a sudden we get more relationships, more experiences, more challenges come into our life. And as those challenges come into our life, this habit that we could once monitor, that we could once manage, starts to get out of control. So what do? We bury it. We bury this habit deep, deep down where nobody knows what we struggle with. Nobody knows this is something we're even dealing with. We don't talk to people about it because we don't intend to get hurt. It's not that big a deal. So we bury it in our lives and we cover it with 1,000 decisions. And we never expected it to blow up. We never expected all the other people to get hurt. See, many of us, we've been on the receiving end of one of these explosions. It's the pastor who had the affair. And now many of our friends haven't been back to church in 20 years. It's our friend who started getting involved in drugs, and then he needed a bigger and bigger hit. And now there's all this pain and all this carnage all over life. And the whole time the person was headed in this direction, they buried the secret so deep, and they said it's not going to be that big a deal. But given the right time and given the right pressure, our secrets come out. Our secrets explode. And not only do they hurt us, they hurt the people we care about the most.
I was sitting, waiting, wishing you believed in superstition. Then maybe you'd see the signs. The Lord knows that this world is cruel. I ain't the Lord, no, I'm just a fool. Learn to loving somebody, don't make them love you. Must I always be waiting on you? Must I always be playing your fool? I sang your songs, I danced the dance, gave your friends all a chance, but putting up with them wasn't worth never having you. Maybe you've been through this before, but it's my first time, so please ignore next few lines, they're directed at you. I can't always be waiting on you. I can't always be playing your fool. I keep playing your part, but it's not my scene. Want this plot to twist, I've had enough mystery. You're building it up and shooting me down, but I'm already down. Just wait a minute, just sit and wait it. Just wait a minute, just sit and wait it. Well, if I was in your position, I'd put down all my ammunition and wonder why it's taken me so long. But the Lord knows that I'm not you. If I was, I wouldn't be so cruel. Waiting on love ain't so easy to do. Must I always be waiting, waiting on you? Must I always be playing, playing you fool? I can't always be waiting, waiting on you. I can't always be playing, playing you fool, fool.
Always waiting, waiting, waiting. My goodness, have true words ever been spoken about life? I mean, think of all the time that you spend waiting in like the pickup line at school or the drive-through line at the Kroger pharmacy. I mean, I've spent like eons of my life at that place. Or maybe it's in the waiting on like a relationship. Like you think back with your spouse, the many years you waited for that right person. Or maybe parents, it's in the waiting on a teenager to begin speaking to you in complete sentences again, right? Instead of eye rolls and grunts. Or maybe it's professional waiting. That like, hey, when I cross that threshold, when I finally hit that number, then I can really begin to focus on the important things again, like family and friends, and maybe kicking the tires, on this faith thing, just checking it out. But until then, I'm waiting. Well, if any of that resonates with you, then today, God has a few promises for you. We're continuing our way through the Old Testament, Jesus' Bible, and we're going to look at 4 characters today that they really struggled to wait in their lives. And what we're going to see is that as they got a little impatient, they started focusing on some things that they shouldn't, some negative things, and they started to push away out of their focus some things that they should focus on. And a principle is going to rise to the top, and it's this, that we become what we bring into our focus, okay? Ooh, look at that, and it's like a mirror. I become that, and we betray what we put out of our focus. So today we're going to see that in these 4 characters. So we're going to start with our first character of the day, and it is Israel. And if you remember last week, Chad set up this idea that Israel, and again, this is not a he or a she, but a they or a them, the country, the kingdom of Israel. Israel has gone through this journey of ups and downs where consistently we are going to find that over and over and over again, Israel is going to ignore God. They're going to put their fingers in their ears and say, God, thanks, but no thanks, okay? And let's catch up on our Old Testament map here. Beverly, if you can throw that up with where we're at in the journey. Last week, Chad brought us up to the time of the Judges, if you remember that. He talked about Samson and Naomi and Job and Gideon. And today, we're going to jump out of that time at the little mountain peaks, and we're going to jump into the time of the monarchs, the time of the kings, okay? But where we end off with Israel in their ignoring of God is they are in some trouble, okay? The they're worshiping foreign gods. They're kind of behaving like sugared up toddlers that just aren't listening and really need to go take a nap. Their temple is full of priests who don't even know God anymore. These priests are abusing people that are coming to the temple, looking to draw close to God. Well, they're giving them a helping of abuse. That's good. And on top of that, they have lost the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, so think of Indiana Jones, this golden box that God had them build that signified his presence on earth with them. Well, they started taking that with them into battles. Okay, and they weren't told to do that. But maybe how you take like a lucky ball marker to the golf course with you or a lucky nickel to the casino, they started dragging this thing around with them, and eventually they lose it. The Philistines wipe them out one day and just take that. So they are in just utter disarray, and they're not focusing anymore on God, and they've put that out of their focus. But God in his mercy is going to send them an olive branch, and it's going to be in the person of Samuel, okay, a man. And Samuel is going to serve as this hinge between these two periods, where you have the time of the judges, and Samuel is going to be the last judge, but he's also going to be the prophet who will coronate the first two kings. So he's like this bridge between the two. And what you need to know about Samuel is his name literally means hears or listens. So think of that with our ignoring picture there, that God sends them a prophet whose name means, hey, hear me. And from a young age, Samuel's been able to hear from God. And Samuel's role with them is going to be to constantly remind them, hey, listen to God. Like God's speaking, follow him. Hey, he wants you to hear this. And over again, they're going to say, yeah, no thanks. And as they're waiting, they're going to continue waiting on God. And really, I think they're waiting on God to become a little more accommodating, like to jump when they say to jump. And God's not asking how high when they say jump. He doesn't do that. So I picture it. I picture them, the Israelites, they're around the fire, okay, and they're talking. And for some reason, they have an accent like they're from Brooklyn. And they're like, hey, you know what? Like, God doesn't always show up when we want him to show up, does he? Yeah, God's never here. They're mumbling. Well, what do you guys think about this? What if we make like one of us king? Like, wouldn't that be pretty smart? Because then we could like pressure him. Maybe it's Tony. We could get more out of God. I think that's what's going on in their heart is they want a king that's a human. So they go to Samuel and they're like, hey Samuel, we want you to go tell God that we want like a different king. Okay. And Samuel, he's like, okay. And I don't know about you, if you've ever had to deliver awkward news to your boss, but Samuel probably strolls into the office, and he's like, so, hey, God, yeah, this weather's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it's snowing in Texas. I mean, holy cow. Yeah, so God, your people. Yeah, I know my people. God's playing along. He really knows why Samuel's there, I would imagine. He's like, so your people, they kind of want to take a different girl to the dance. They kind of want to be ruled by one of their own and not you anymore. And God's playing along and he's like, okay, so Samuel, it's my God voice. Samuel, here's what I want you to do. Take really good notes and tell them this. Okay, you don't want to be ruled by a human because he's human, okay? He's going to be flawed. He's going to lie to them. He's going to steal from them. He's going to send their children to die in foreign battles. Like, you don't want that. Trust me. Okay, go tell them that, Samuel. Okay, so Samuel goes and he goes back to the people and he lays out for them all that God said. And spoiler alert, here's what they're going to say to him. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but we will have a king. So they said, God, thanks, but no thanks. Like, we appreciate the information, but, you stay in heaven, do your God things, bless our battles, but we still want a king. And God's going to relent and allow Samuel to coronate the first two kings, and another king will follow. And God's words are going to prove true that each one of those kings, they'll have their moments where they rule well, where they're focusing on the things they should, but they're going to have a whole lot of moments where they focus on what they shouldn't, and it's going to bring pain and sorrow and brokenness into their lives, and also into the lives of the Israelites. But in that moment, God has a promise for him. Okay, and it's our first promise of the day. God is going to promise to not forsake them. Then Samuel said to the people, "Do not fear. You have done all this wickedness." Like, God sees it. You're not pulling a fast one on him. He sees all of this stuff you're doing. But don't turn aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. And then hear this, for the Lord will not forsake his people. That God's saying, hey, tell them that though they ignore me, put their fingers in the air, they forsake me, like, I'm not gonna forsake them. In the 30s, Ernest Hemingway wrote a short story called Capital of the World. I encourage you to read it sometime. It's set in Madrid, Spain, and it's about a father and son. Okay, and the son is in his early adolescence, and they have a huge blow-up fight. They both say things that they regret, and the son leaves. He takes off into the streets of Madrid. And as the father comes to his senses, he, after a few hours, goes out and he tries to find his son. His son's name's Paco. And he looks for days and can't find Paco, and he looks for weeks and still can't find Paco. And eventually, after months, in desperation, the dad puts a posting in the newspaper, and it says this. It says, "Dear Paco, all is forgiven. I love you. Meet me in front of the newspaper office at noon on Sunday, Dad." And as Hemingway's words unfold over the rest of the story, at noon on that day, over 800 Pacos show up seeking love and forgiveness from their father. And friends, I think Hemingway understood something true about the heart of man and the heart of women, that we long for a loving connection with our fathers. Right? And I don't know about you, like what your relationship is like with your dad or was like with your dad. I know for me, my dad was a great protector and provider, but I also know that I longed for a deeper friendship with him than I ever was able to achieve before he passed away. And I don't know where you're at on that spectrum with your own father, but I do know this, that the God of the Old Testament, the Father God of the Old Testament, who's the same Father God of the New Testament, who's the same Father God of 2021, he's a pursuing God, okay? And whether you ignore him, whether you forsake him, whether you run the other way, he is going to pursue you with a fatherly love. So that's our first character. And Samuel is going to coronate the first king of Israel, who's going to be our second character, and his name is going to be Saul. Okay, and at first, Saul is going to be everything you could imagine that's kingly, okay? He's going to be tall, handsome, athletic. I mean, it's a little bit like looking in a mirror, honestly. Initially, he's going to have all of the traits of a king that you would want, right? He's strutting around the kingdom, and at first he's making amazing decisions. He's humble, he's kind, and really what it is he's focusing on God and his family and his troops. And he's becoming those good things, but then he's going to push them out of focus, and he's going to start focusing on his son-in-law, David, okay? And David, if you've heard it, he's the little guy, the like pre-teenager who kills a giant with a few stones and a strap of leather. Okay, and as David does that, he's going to be pulled from the shepherd field of obscurity into the palace in the matter of like 24 hours. He kills the giant. The price for that is the hand of Saul's daughter in marriage. So all of a sudden, he's in the palace. He's going to become best friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. And David is an amazing warrior, obviously. He kills a giant. He's going to go on to win a lot of battles. He's a musician. He's a poet. He is quite literally, if Chuck Norris and Bruce Springsteen like came together to make a person, that would be David, right? He's a man's man. And Saul's going to see that, and he's going to remember. He's going to remember, hey, I'm middle-aged now, and I remember having a chiseled jawline like David. And I remember those rock-hard abs like David. And he's going to get jealous. And maybe he sees in David even things he never possessed, like David's leadership, David's amazing, authentic love for God. And as he focuses on that, again, he's pushed out of focus God, his family, his troops. As he focuses on his own inadequacies, he is going to just be consumed with violent rage, okay? And for years, not just one fit of temper, for years, he's going to chase his son-in-law around the mountains and the valleys, trying to just utterly kill him, okay? And that's all he's going to think about. It's going to consume him. But God has a promise for him. Okay, God is going to make him a promise to become a new man. And our second promise is this, that God promises to change our heart if we ask. In Samuel 10, then the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you, and you will prophesy with them and be turned into another man. So it was when he had turned his back to go from Samuel that God gave him another heart. You see, God offered Saul the chance to become a new man, a less angry man, a less envious man, a less bitter man. And there's these moments, gang, as we read through the story where Saul will soften and he'll stop chasing David. He'll come to his senses, and it's like God's given him that heart, and he's changing. And then with Saul, again, God only does this if you really want a new heart. It's like Saul takes it out, and he just thrusts it back to God and says, take it back. And he sticks back in the rock, and he's back to being jealous and angry and full of bitter. And he will never really conquer that he is going to die in battle, having never really conquered that demon of envy with his son-in-law. And friends, I wonder if you've been there before, right? Like, think of Saul. So he's middle-aged. And as I've hit middle age, believe it or not, I'm in my 40s. I mean, I know I look like I'm a 22-year-old Brad Pitt, but I'm 45 or close to it. And as I get there, man, it starts to get easy to sit back and, you start thinking about your life, okay? And you're like, life's pretty good, whether you're 40, 50, 60, wherever you're at, you're like, it's pretty good. I mean, I'm not driving like a flying car good. It's not that good yet, but it's still pretty good. Hashtag blessed, right? You put that on Facebook. But then you start seeing the thinner waistlines, and the thinner face lines of the people around you. And those big, full, thick head of hair like Neil on the music team has, right? And you're like, that Neil, ugh. And you're like, has God held out on me? Like, do I not have it anymore? And really, as you focus on that, you can really start to become some dark things, right? Well, this promise from God is true, that he will give you a new heart in the midst of that. He will help you change. So again, Saul dies in battle, and Samuel is going to coronate our third character of the day, and that is going to be David. So crazy enough, the son-in-law is going to be coronated here. And David, again, he is like hero of the world in Israel, and he's going to start out amazingly well, okay? He's going to take Jerusalem back. He's going to move the kingdom there, the capital of the kingdom. But then what we're going to see, and that's a crown. I don't quite draw as well as Chad. What we're going to see is that David drifts, okay? And he's going to drift so much so that his house is going to be shattered, all right? So he starts well. He's focusing on God, his family, the battles, his warriors. But then he's going to hit middle age. And honestly, I think he just gets kind of bored. Like, he's been so successful that he's kind of like, well, what's next? And I remember seeing a Tom Brady interview after his second Super Bowl win. So go way back. And they're interviewing him. They're like, so Tom, tell us about it. Like, how does it feel to win 2 Super Bowls, right? Now he's got like 10, but 2 Super Bowls. And Tom goes, yeah, it's all right. Like, here's Tom Brady. He's won 2 Super Bowls at this point. He's married to a supermodel. He's worth $200 million. Like, yeah, it's pretty good, but sometimes I just wonder, like, is there more? I encourage you to YouTube it. It's enlightening. And it's almost like he's saying, like, hey, is there a Super Bowl that I can win? Like, what's next? And I think that's where we find David, that he's just kind of waiting on some new adventure that's not there. The Bible says that it's the time of year where kings are supposed to go out to battle, and David finds himself bored on the rooftop of his palace, okay? And in case you're wondering, newsflash, boredom and men rarely go well together. So he's strolling around bored, and what is that? And he sees in the distance a woman bathing, okay? Bathsheba, funny enough, her name Bathsheba, she's in a bath. And he has that moment, because we've all seen things that we shouldn't, and we have that choice where we're like, I'm going to turn away, not meant to see that. Or, I'm going to take that all in like a Thanksgiving feast with my eyes, right? And David goes all in on the mashed potatoes and gravy, okay? Like he takes it all in, and then he sends his men to get Bathsheba. They bring him back. She, as a result of that, becomes pregnant. And here again, David has this moment. He's drifting. Can he pull back God into focus, come clean? Oh no, he pushes that back out. And he tries to hide it. Bathsheba's husband's a friend of his. He tries to trick the friend, like, hey, your wife, he's trying to make it look like it's Uriah's baby. Can't pull that off, so he just flat out murders his buddy. Like, there's no other way to put it. He sends him to the front in a battle and tells everybody, pull back. And Uriah's murdered. And then as David continues to focus on this thing he shouldn't, he's going to slide in as like the hero and be like, oh, Bathsheba, why don't you come to my palace since your husband died in battle? Wink, wink, I killed him. And he marries Bathsheba, okay? And the drift continues. Soon enough, Bathsheba's not enough. He adds 4 other wives. Soon enough, there's a ton of children in the palace. They all have David as a father, but they all have different mothers, 6 different moms. And as they hit maturity, abuse begins to just be rampant, okay? Like every type of abuse you could imagine is going on under his house. And he's not protecting his daughters. He's not disciplining his sons. One of his sons is going to come back in a violent coup attempt and try to take him out. And in that process, his son's going to be killed, a son that he loved, by the way. And David's going to be amazingly broken. And friends, as I think of David, I think sometimes a slow, almost incomprehensible drift is far more dangerous in life than just a quick old turn off the road, right? Because in a slow, almost incomprehensible drift, you don't really know what damage is being caused until sometimes it's too late and the horse is out of the barn, and you've just done some bad damage. Like, think about this. A couple weeks ago, right, about 200 million of us were watching the Super Bowl, and some idiot jumps out of the stands, right, the streaker. You guys remember that guy? And he's wearing far too little clothing. So I don't know if you want to YouTube that, but it happens. He jumps out. Well, as soon as that guy goes over the railing, right, out onto the field, it's like he knows immediately that he's in no man's land, right? There was no drifting there. That was like a dive. He knows he's in no man's land. Everybody in the stadium knows he's in no man's land. And everybody in the world who's watching knows he's in no man's land. Well, when you drift, you don't get that. You just get these slow little losses of trust and intimacy in relationships. So friends, it's a question I think we have to ask today is like, am I drifting? Like, am I drifting maybe in my relationship with my spouse or my kids? Am I drifting further and further away from any sort of relationship I might have with God? Well, if that's you, and it certainly has been me, then God has a promise for us that he had for David. And it's a promise of unconditional relationship. He says, I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men, but my mercy shall not depart from him. Friends, God's a good father. So he's going to let David face the consequences of his actions. He's going to let David face discipline, that foreign invaders are going to come in and help discipline David. But at the same time, he's not going to remove his mercy from him. It's an unconditional love. And Becky and I sometimes will watch these crime dramas. I don't know if you guys ever watch those documentaries. And there'll be like a mass murderer sitting on the stands, and he looks like everybody's worst nightmare. And they're interrogating him and in the course of the trial. And there on the front row is like his poor mom, right? And she's just sitting there like heartbroken, and she doesn't know what to do because she loves her son, or there's women serial killers. She loves her daughter. She's so committed. Well, that is like a tiny glimpse of the unconditional love that God has for us. Well, here's our fourth character for the day, is our last king of the day, and it's Solomon. And in a sign of God's mercy, honestly, Solomon is actually the son, you guessed it, of David and Bathsheba. And Solomon has an interesting start to his story, okay? That God is going to say to Solomon, hey, here's a blank check. Like, you can have anything you want, Solomon, okay? So Solomon has that, and he's not going to ask for love, okay? He saw that growing up in his house, pleasure, all of that. It didn't work out for the family, didn't work out for his dad. So he's not going to ask for that. He's not going to ask for money. He saw how that didn't bring happiness. He's not even going to ask for just fame. What he's going to ask for is wisdom. That Solomon has seen it all growing up in the household he grew up in, and he's going to ask God to give him wisdom to make good decisions. And at first, Solomon's going to rule just like Saul and David did. At first, he's going to rule really well. He's going to go on to be the richest king pretty much of all time. Like, he expanded the border so far, drew in so much gold, that silver became a common metal. They just took it out of the coffers and threw it out in the metal heap out back because there was so much wealth. Okay, God's going to give him so much wisdom through the connection with God that he's going to go on to write books. He's going to be this best-selling author. He's got 3 of them in our Bible. One of them is Proverbs, which is a book of wisdom from like a father to a son. One of them is Song of Solomon, which is a book that'll make you blush. It's a book about Solomon and his marriage to his wife. It's about monogamous love over the course of a lifetime. And again, it's like honeymoon type stuff, okay? So looking for a good read, go there. He's totally focusing on what he should and totally just crushing it. But again, that's slowly going to get put aside, and he's going to begin to forget the lessons that he's learned. And friends, he's going to forget big time, okay? He's going to go from writing a book about a lifelong monogamous marriage to having 700 wives, okay? And then he's going to add 300 concubines. I mean, I was like a C student in math, but I know that that's 1,000 ladies, and there's only 365 days in a year, okay? Like, don't know what Solomon's thinking, but what we do know is it's actually more about trust than it is about lust. That Solomon's really marrying all these brides, these princesses, because they're parts of countries and kingdoms and areas around his kingdom. So he's trying to secure his kingdom kind of artificially by just marrying a bunch of ladies. And really, he's forgetting that God is the reason that he has this big, huge kingdom, right? And he's going to go on to write his 3rd book, Ecclesiastes, where he's going to say, hey, I've tried everything over the rainbow, money, fame, pleasure. I've tried it all, and it is all meaningless. Like, this guy had chased the rainbow and got to the end, and there was no pot of gold. And that's where we find him. Okay, but in that, God again, in his goodness, is going to have a promise for Solomon that is good for us too. And he's going to promise him this wisdom. He's going to say, hey, because you asked for this thing, wisdom, and haven't asked for a long life, you haven't asked for riches, you haven't asked for me to kill your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. I have given you a wise and understanding heart. You see, friends, God gives Solomon a type of wisdom that isn't like Rain Man meets Jeopardy quiz show type wisdom. It's really, hey, God's saying, I'm the author of wisdom, and I'm going to give you unlimited wisdom through your connection with me, Solomon. But you got to remember that. Don't forget it. And friends, it can be easy to lose track, right? Like it can be easy to begin to forget where you've seen maybe God move in your life. It can be easy to drift. It can be easy to get envious. And one of the things I would encourage you with is that like it's a lot easier to do all those things if you're flying solo, right? I went to Men's Warehouse yesterday and picked out this spiffy sweater, and I stepped into this mirror hallway that like surrounds me, okay? And it's really enlightening because you can see your backside while seeing your front side. And it just tells you everything. Well, that's kind of what living in community looks like. That here at Horizon, we have these men and women's groups, and it's a way to grow friendships and community with a small group of men, fellows, or ladies with a small group of ladies. And it happens slowly and gradually, but you're able to begin sharing your life. And you can be able to have somebody say, hey, you're drifting. Hey, you're getting really angry. And it's somebody you trust and love. So I encourage you to think about that. Talk to me, talk to Chad, Drew. Any of us would love to connect you with a community. You can also, I think, grow in wisdom as we're in this Fast Track series by taking a look at the booklet. Like Becky and I have taken a few of these home because I forget them and lose them, so I might have taken more than 2. Sorry, Chad. And as I'm reading them, they're kind of this in-between between the Bible, which has a whole lot of facts, a whole lot of detail, really good, and then our talks, which are like the 30,000-foot view of the Old Testament, and then the Fast Track booklet is like right in the middle, where you get a little more detail, a little more color than our talks, but it's not quite as much detail as the actual Bible. So I'd encourage you to grab one. Also on our website, you can pop it up there if you're waiting at a doctor's office, horizoncc.com/fasttrack. Check out that. And friends, as I think about our characters for today, there's one word I think of is remember. That if Israel would have remembered that, hey, God pulled us out of Egypt, right? Like God ripped us out of the clutches of this evil, Pharaoh who wanted to just enslave us. God fed us. God led us to the promised land. Like we can trust him. We can pull our fingers out of our ears. Or if Saul would have remembered, hey, you're a king. Like God picked you. He allowed you to become king, and he's a shepherd boy, right? Like there's no reason for you to be jealous of him. It's like Tom Brady being jealous of me. Like it just shouldn't happen, right? Or if David would have remembered that God had pulled him from being a shepherd, the last of the brothers that nobody even thought of when they were looking for the next king, and now he's the king, the second king of Israel. If he would have remembered that and remembered to stay focused, he wouldn't have been strolling around his rooftop bored. And if Solomon would have remembered that, hey, God is the source of all wisdom. Man, when I focused on him, things went amazingly. But it's hard to remember. We have to focus on it. So today I would encourage you to pick a promise from what we've looked at and try to remember it this week. So maybe you need to remember that God will not forsake you. Okay, that maybe you've been ignoring, maybe you've been putting your fingers in your ears, you've just been kind of doing your own thing. Well, know that you haven't fallen off of his radar. He's still pursuing you. Or maybe you need to remember that God can give you a new heart, that he can make you a new man or a new woman. And maybe for you it's not envy, maybe it's bitterness, maybe it's worry, maybe it's anxiety has consumed you. Well, God's saying, hey, I'll give you a new heart, I'll make you new. Or maybe you need to remember that God's love is unconditional. Maybe you're that Super Bowl streaker who's jumped over the guardrail and you're off in no man's land. Well, God is still saying, hey, my mercy hasn't departed you. I'm still here. Or maybe you need to remember, like Solomon, that God is the source of wisdom. And if you are feeling off track, that he can help you get back on track. So let me pray for our time. Jesus, thank you for your word. I thank you that when I look at the Old Testament, I see a lot of people that I relate with, honestly, that they are not perfect, they are not saints. They desperately needed your forgiveness over and over and over again. But I thank you that each and every time you met them in the midst of their brokenness with a promise of your character, a promise of your goodness, if they would only remember. In your name, amen.
when I cannot breathe. Fear is on my chest, the weight of the world on me. Everything is crashing down, everything I had known. When I wonder if I'm all alone, I remember. Giants fall, I've seen mountains move, I've seen waters part because of you. I remember, you have always been faithful to me. I remember. Can't stop thinking about, can't stop thinking about your goodness. Can't stop thinking about, can't stop thinking about, can't stop thinking about your goodness. Can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about, I can't stop thinking about your goodness. Can't stop thinking about, can't stop thinking about, can't stop thinking about your goodness. I remember, you have always been faithful to me. I remember, even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there for me.
Wow, that was impressive. So that's the encouragement, friends, to remember that you are pursued every minute of every day by a good and loving Father. We'll continue our journey next week with our fast track promises, and we hope to see you.